A thunderous blow cracked through the arena, sending the fighter sprawling onto the mat. The audience gasped in collective shock as the referee lunged in, crouching quickly to check for signs of movement. Meanwhile, the victor was already strutting across the ring, arms lifted high, a smug grin stretching across his face. He soaked in the spotlight, stopping just long enough to lean over his fallen rival and hurl a barrage of jeers, loud and defiant. Some fans erupted in cheers, feeding off the bravado. Others looked around uneasily, the display striking a nerve. In the front row, not far from the cage, Sylvester Stallone sat still as stone. His face betrayed nothing. No applause, no reaction. Just unwavering eyes locked on the fighter in the ring. The loudmouth caught sight of him. Breathless, chest heaving, he grabbed the mic and jabbed a finger in Stallone's direction. "Hey, Stallone! You think you're tough on screen? Why don't you step in here and prove it?" The crowd hushed, a ripple of tension spreading like wildfire. Then the chants began, a mix of cheers and curiosity. All eyes turned to Sylvester. He remained seated for a moment, composed, eyes fixed forward. Then, without a word, he rose. Calm and assured, he took one deliberate step toward the cage. The entire arena fell into a heavy silence. Everyone knew something was shifting. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Sylvester Stallone goes head-to-head with the cocky MMA fighter. And drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. The stadium vibrated with raw anticipation. Every seat taken, every voice merging into an overwhelming roar that bounced off the steel rafters. Bright floodlights poured down over the polished floor of the cage, while camera flashes exploded in every direction. Fans surged forward, waving signs and gripping the edge of their seats, eyes glued to the action ahead. The night pulsed with energy, a charge in the air like the moments before a thunderstorm. Right in the heart of it all sat Sylvester Stallone, calm and centered, settled into his seat ringside in the VIP section. He wore a dark tailored jacket, his shirt collar open, black denim completing the understated look. He hadn't come with a crowd, no showmanship, but he didn't need it. Even in stillness, the gaze of the arena kept drifting to him. He rested one hand casually on his knee, the other relaxed at his side. No smile, no movement, just unbroken focus, his attention anchored firmly on the cage. While the crowd's attention shifted in waves, all the spotlight was now on the undefeated young fighter, a name the audience had been chanting earlier. The rising sensation of the night, not just for his skill, but for the way he commanded every moment. Flashy, proud, cold. He didn't just fight to win, he performed to dominate, to provoke, to draw the spotlight into his orbit. Every motion, every look was tuned to get a rise from the crowd. He bounced on the balls of his feet, smirking at the cameras, drinking in the noise. People either loved his fire or loathed his arrogance, but nobody ignored him. Across the cage from him stood an older opponent, a veteran with a long, respected career. No theatrics, no trash talk. A fighter who let his experience and discipline do the speaking. But tonight, none of that earned him any mercy. From the instant the bell rang, the younger fighter launched into a vicious rhythm. His hits were rapid, deliberate, merciless. He gave no room for his opponent to settle. The veteran pushed back with grit, but the pace was dictated from the start, as if the young man had a point to prove. The finish came quick and hard. A rapid-fire combo, a clean shot to the jaw, and the veteran crumpled to the mat. The smack of the fall reverberated around the cage. The referee sprang into action, waving the fight off as medics stormed in. The crowd split in reaction. Some erupted with adrenaline-fueled cheers, while others shrank into silence, unsettled by how fast and brutal it had all ended. But the victor soaked it all in. He strutted proudly across the cage, muscles flexed, face shining with sweat and triumph. He taunted the crowd, jeered at the fallen, a grin pasted across his face like a badge. There was no sign of restraint, no class, just raw, loud spectacle. And then, without hesitation, he snatched up the mic, Yet amidst the thunder of cheers and flashing lights, one man hadn't moved. Sylvester Stallone sat there, untouched by the chaos around him. His posture steady, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. He watched everything, every taunt, every gesture. No applause, no words, just a quiet, unblinking presence. And eventually, the fighter caught that stare. Between the flickering cameras and pulsing chants, his eyes flicked to the front row. "Who's stepping up next?" the fighter bellowed, his voice slicing through the charged air. A roar erupted from parts of the crowd, thrilled by the spectacle of his power. Yet others remained hushed, exchanging glances filled with awe and discomfort at the cold efficiency of his win. Down near the front, in the velvet-cordoned VIP section, eyes began to turn toward a man sitting with unwavering stillness. The broadcast camera zoomed in, lingering. Sylvester, dressed sharply, sat motionless, his expression carved from stone. No applause, no smirk, just an unwavering gaze, locked on the fighter with an intensity that seemed to cut through the noise. The moment he spotted him, his expression shifted instantly, that grin stretching even further across his face. Holding onto the microphone, he wiped the sweat from his brow and began striding around the octagon like a seasoned performer. "Hey, Stallone," he called out, voice booming through the arena. "I see you sitting there all quiet." A wave of gasps rolled through the crowd like a sudden gust. The atmosphere stirred. Some fans laughed, others leaned in, murmuring to one another, poking elbows, eyes darting between the cage and the figure in the VIP section. Then, the chant took hold. "Sylvester! Sylvester! Sylvester!" It echoed through the seats. Some voices thrilled, others tense with anticipation. Sylvester didn't blink. He remained absolutely still, his gaze fixed on the fighter in the ring. No smile, no reaction, just a calm, unreadable focus. Inside the cage, the young man bounced on the balls of his feet, feeding off the noise, his smirk growing by the second. The young champion jumped down from the cage, grabbing the microphone from the MC, chest heaving. His steps were slow, deliberate, like he was savoring each moment. "You all saw that, didn't you?" he called out, voice slicing through the crowd like a blade. "That's what real fighting looks like." The audience responded in scattered bursts, a mix of excitement and curiosity swelling into a louder chorus. But he wasn't finished. Not yet. He lifted a finger, aiming it directly at Stallone. A sly grin spread across his face. "What's the matter? Only tough when there's a script and a camera rolling?" The crowd gasped. Every head snapped toward Stallone. The fighter strutted around the octagon like a showman, tossing phantom punches for the cameras. "This," he pointed to the mat under his feet, "this ain't a movie set. This is the real deal." Laughter rang out in spots. Some fans nudged each other, wondering if he'd gone too far. Still, there was a stir, a shifting undercurrent in the stands. Near the front rows, a few fans got to their feet, chanting a name. "Sylvester! Sylvester!" It caught on. Phones lit up the crowd like stars. Everyone held their breath. The fighter grinned, reveling in the electricity. "Tell you what," he said sharply. "You're sitting front and center. Why don't you get in here and show us what you've really got? Or is your stunt double busy tonight?" Another wave of gasps swept through the audience. Some roared with laughter. Others leaned forward, unable to look away. But Sylvester still hadn't moved. He remained just as he had been from the beginning. Body relaxed, eyes fixed. No trace of amusement, no flicker of irritation, just a steady, unreadable calm. The fighter began to bounce in place, working the crowd, his voice louder now. "Come on, Stallone, one round, just one. Let's see if all that silver screen muscle means anything in here." More cameras swiveled toward Sylvester. The arena buzzed with anticipation. A few folks in the upper rows stood up, holding their breath. Yet his face remained unchanged. He didn't so much as twitch. The fighter kept hurling challenges, voice echoing off the walls. But slowly, the attention began to drift. Not to the words being shouted, but to the man who didn't need to answer. It was the silence that spoke loudest. That still, composed presence at ringside began to pull focus, like gravity. All eyes were now on him. The whole arena, still buzzing, seemed to narrow its energy to that one chair. Sylvester Stallone hadn't budged. Even long after the taunts faded, he sat there, hands resting lightly on his knees, shoulders loose, gaze steady, revealing nothing. The crowd's roar dulled, like a wave retreating. Lights narrowed on the VIP section where Sylvester Stallone sat, unmoving, his eyes locked onto the fighter pacing the cage with a microphone in hand. The young man's voice was loud, brash, daring Stallone to rise, to respond, to step into his world. But Stallone didn't flinch, not because he wasn't listening, but because he was already somewhere else. A bead of sweat slid down the side of his temple, not from nerves, but from memory. The noise around him seemed to fade, replaced by something quieter, older. Something from before the fame, before the films, before the world ever knew his name. That kid in the cage, full of fire and ego, reminded him too much of someone he used to be. Not the Stallone on the movie posters. The young man from the Bronx gym, fists taped tight, hunger in his eyes, and not just the metaphorical kind. Back then, every punch thrown had weight, rent, heat, dignity, survival. He fought not for glory, but because losing wasn't an option. And then there was that night. Stallone remembered it with painful clarity. A cramped gym, humid with sweat and blood. A veteran fighter stood across from him, a man who had once taught him to move with purpose, to respect the ring. But that night, Stallone didn't see a teacher. He saw a paycheck. He moved fast, hit hard, too hard. The crowd roared when the man crumpled, but the old man's eyes didn't close. They just stared, disappointed, hollow, and that was worse. The sound of the present blurred again, replaced by the memory of a rain-soaked bench at a subway station. Young Stallone sat alone, fists bloodied, the air around him cold and still. No cheers, no cameras, just silence. An old friend, who had refereed that fight, sat beside him without a word. After a long pause, he said, "Real strength doesn't demand submission, it earns quiet respect." Stallone never fought in that gym again, not because he feared defeat, but because he finally understood victory could be uglier. That strength wasn't just about hitting, sometimes it was about walking away. And from that night, a seed was planted, one that would grow into a character named Rocky. Not a champion, but a fighter. A man who stood back up not because he could win, but because he refused to stay down. People loved Rocky not for the knockouts, but for the scars. Back in the arena, the young fighter was still shouting, still challenging, still burning with the kind of fire Stallone had long since learned to tame. But he didn't see arrogance anymore. He saw a mirror, a boy trying to prove something to the world, unaware that sometimes, in proving yourself, you lose something more valuable. Stallone leaned forward slightly, uncapping a bottle of water, taking a slow sip as the chants of his name grew louder. But he wasn't responding to them. He was grounding himself, pressing the past down, steadying his hands. There was no tremble in them, just the quiet firmness of time. He didn't answer the fighter. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes. To that young man, Stallone wasn't an actor. He wasn't a relic. He was something far more dangerous, a man who had already fought his worst battles and had the discipline not to flaunt it. And the crowd, slowly, instinctively, began to sense it too. The chants changed. Less frenzy, more reverence, like a hymn. Then Stallone stood. It was not sudden, not dramatic, just a man rising, slow, controlled, inevitable. He shrugged off his jacket with deliberate ease, handing it to the old trainer beside him. Another ghost from his past, always present, never intrusive. The cage door opened. No music, no spotlight, just space. And into that space stepped not a performer, but a presence. The fighter in the ring grinned, but his eyes darted because he could feel the air shift. This wasn't a theater anymore. It was a reckoning. Stallone entered the cage without saying a word, but everything he needed to say was already there, in his steps, in his breath, in the weight of who he was. The crowd didn't erupt this time. They stood, quietly, as if witnessing something sacred. This wasn't a fight. It was a lesson. Cameras caught it all in an instant. The air pulsed with excitement as whispers turned into hums and people leaned forward in their seats. In the cage, the young fighter noticed too. A grin stretched across his face as he snatched the mic and began pacing near the ropes. "Well, look at that," he called out, pointing toward Sylvester. "The man's finally on his feet. Stallone stepping in." He threw his arms wide in mock triumph. "Took you long enough. I figured you'd stay seated, hiding behind those glasses like a retiree at the matinee." Laughter broke through the crowd, nervous and uncertain. No one sure if the young man was teasing or setting the stage for something real. But Sylvester kept moving forward, slow and steady, with the kind of walk that didn't need to prove a thing. He moved like someone who belonged there. Every step seemed to draw in the stadium's air, and a chant began to build. "Sly, Sly!" The fighter, still playing to the crowd, turned back and shouted, "Come on, cheer for him! Your aging action hero's gonna need the help!" Then he dropped the mic and began bouncing on the balls of his feet, brimming with confidence. The cage crew didn't even question it. They stepped aside as the gate opened. Stallone stepped through without a word. No spotlight, no grand entrance, just quiet certainty. He took his place with practiced ease, body relaxed yet grounded, eyes fixed on his opponent. The camera flashes came in waves. The commentators' voices faded behind the growing roar. Inside the cage, the young man kept circling, the grin never leaving his face. "So what's the plan, Rocky?" he mocked, his voice louder now. "Gonna throw a few Hollywood punches? Maybe do a slow-motion spin for the fans?" But Stallone said nothing. He just moved in, step by step. The space between them vanished until only inches remained. And then, silence. That kind of tight, breath-holding silence before something momentous. Up close, everything shifted. The younger fighter kept smiling, but there was an edge now, a flicker of nerves. He bounced a little, trying to stay loose, and tossed out one more jab. "Better hope someone's filming this, old man." But Sylvester's face didn't move. No smirk, no twitch. His eyes held steady, calm, and unreadable. The crowd leaned closer. Phones rose like a field of glowing flowers, capturing every moment. Around the cage, something was changing. The noise thinned. The energy dropped a few degrees as everyone realized this wasn't an act. There were no referees, no starting bell, just two men, no gimmicks, no choreography. The cocky look on the younger man's face wavered ever so slightly as Stallone refused to engage in the banter. For the first time, uncertainty showed in the young fighter's eyes. Stallone hadn't spoken a word, but his presence said more than any comeback could. The crowd sensed it. The chant returned, louder, more urgent. "Sly! Sly!" It echoed across the arena, rising like a wave. Cameras snapped furiously. Every eye locked on the cage. The moment stretched, thick with electricity. The stillness held. And just beneath it, the storm waited. The moment teetered on the edge of chaos. Without a signal, without a referee's word, the younger man launched forward, aggression blazing in his eyes. It was instinct, not strategy that drove him. He moved like a storm, quick and reckless, arms slicing the air, legs snapping upward. Left, right, then a spinning kick. The crowd erupted, some egging him on, chanting wildly as he pushed forward with the fury of youth and ego. But inside that cage, a different rhythm pulsed beneath the noise. Sylvester Stallone didn't flinch. His stance was grounded, shoulders fluid, breaths measured like a man who'd seen this kind of fire before. With every furious strike that came his way, he shifted subtly, avoiding contact by mere inches, never wasting emotion. Where the younger fighter swung with brute force and abandon, Stallone responded with quiet calculation. He wasn't rattled. He was reading. The young man kept talking, taunting between punches. "Come on, Stallone. That all you got?" he jeered, his smirk tighter now, confidence just starting to slip. Sylvester's face gave nothing away. He deflected a blow with practiced ease, stepped around another, flowing like a current around a stubborn rock. The crowd began to shift with the energy. What once was enthusiasm for the brawler's ferocity slowly turned to awe. Sylvester's focus didn't waver. Hands steady, eyes locked in, he never let the storm shake him. The barrage kept coming. The kicks flew higher. The punches struck harder, but still, none of it landed clean. And each time, Stallone responded, not with flash, but with intention. A jab to the ribs, quick and controlled. A deflection here, a pivot there, letting the younger fighter overcommit, letting him feel the weight of his own momentum. The change came subtly. The youth's expression faltered. His breathing grew loud. His strikes grew sloppier. Still, he threw a thunderous uppercut meant to end it all. Stallone slipped beneath it with grace. One strike to the midsection. Then a crisp counter, dead on, snapping the young man's head back. The stadium, moments ago a thunderstorm of cheers, now murmured in growing recognition. Stallone wasn't caught in the fight, he was guiding it. The younger man recoiled, brow furrowed, breath ragged. Gone was the bravado. He paced the cage, eyes scanning, grin vanished. He lunged again, this time with a feint and a spinning kick meant to surprise. Stallone had already seen it. He moved in, quick, quiet, caught the younger man before he could reset, delivered a sharp elbow to the shoulder that made him stumble back. The crowd gasped in unison. Some stood, hands to mouths, watching as the tide visibly turned. The fire in the younger fighter's eyes flickered. He'd come in looking for a spectacle. Instead, he found something far older, something far steadier. The fight had become a lesson, and then the final charge. One last desperate surge, wild and uneven. Sylvester didn't rush. He waited, then moved forward with absolute clarity. A single, devastating right hook landed flush on the jaw. The crack of contact echoed through the arena. Time seemed to stop. The young man's body locked, eyes wide, then his legs gave out. He hit the mat hard, and for a split second, the world held its breath. No cheers, no shouts, only the mechanical click of camera shutters breaking the silence. Stallone stood there, unshaken. No celebration, no triumph in his posture, only presence. Then, as if on cue, the crowd erupted again, louder than ever. "Stallone! Stallone!" The chant rolled through the stadium, lights flashing, voices soaring, a wave of awe crashing over every seat. The crowd near the front surged forward, slamming hands against the railings, while others applauded with wild energy. The commentators struggled to be heard over the roar, their voices drowned beneath a swelling chorus of cheers. Sylvester Stallone turned his head ever so slightly toward the VIP section, his expression as composed as always. With a brief nod, he pivoted and walked toward the cage gate, never once glancing back. On the floor behind him, the defeated fighter remained still, blinking slowly beneath the arena's blinding lights as medical staff rushed to his side. But the crowd's focus had already shifted. Every eye remained fixed on Stallone, a man who never needed words to speak volumes. His actions had done all the talking. The young fighter lay blinking up at the lights, chest rising and falling rapidly, trying to grasp what had just unfolded. Paramedics huddled around him, voices calm but firm. "Can you hear me?" one asked. He gave a faint nod, but his gaze moved beyond them, drawn toward the lone figure walking away. Sylvester never turned his head. The young man groaned, pushing himself awkwardly to one side, his energy sapped. Gone was the confident spring in his step. The cocky smile he'd worn all night had vanished. Sitting upright now, he rubbed his jaw with one hand, drenched in sweat, visibly shaken. The cameras zoomed in, catching the damp hair stuck to his forehead, the dazed expression on his face, and the instant his bravado crumbled into confusion. From the front row, phones were raised high, flashes erupting like fireworks. Each moment of weakness was captured, every second live-streamed to waiting eyes. He scanned the faces before him, once loyal, now turned. The name they now chanted wasn't his. It rolled like thunder. Sylvester. Sylvester. The volume surged, each repetition hitting harder than the last. He squinted against the lights, wiped his face, tried to steady himself. But the sound, the weight of it, was inescapable. Medics helped him to his feet, but his stance was unsteady, his frame sagging. He managed one last glance just in time to see Sylvester disappear through the exit. There were no raised fists, no triumphant gestures, just the same quiet precision with which he had entered. Security stepped aside instinctively, offering no resistance. The cameras followed him like shadows, drawn to his silence. Ringside, fans leaned over barriers, arms stretched out with phones, desperate to capture a fleeting moment. Flashes sparkled from all directions. As Stallone reached the edge, he paused briefly, offering a single glance toward the VIP section. A few familiar faces responded with applause, some nodding in quiet respect. But he remained unreadable, his face calm, untouched by the chaos surrounding him. He tugged lightly at his jacket, loosened his shoulders, and walked down the tunnel. No words, no theatrics. His performance had already said everything. Behind him, chants still rose. Fans pressed closer, eager to relive what they'd just seen, others rushing to share it with the world. In the sea of faces, some stood motionless, stunned by the spectacle. Over the hum, one commentator's voice floated through the din. "Folks, we may have just witnessed something nobody saw coming." Meanwhile, in the press box above, journalists pounded away at keyboards. Online feeds lit up like wildfire, clip after clip of Stallone's clean finish. Headlines exploded. Sylvester Stallone silences MMA's loudest mouth with a single strike. Hollywood icon delivers knockout of the night, without a single word. The buzz intensified with every passing second. In the tunnel, Stallone moved at the same steady pace, unbothered, unchanged. Crew members parted without a word, casting quiet glances as he passed. No one interrupted. No one dared. Back in the octagon, the defeated fighter sat hunched on a stool, a towel draped across his back. His eyes were fixed on the floor, jaw clenched, lips pressed together. He knew the cameras were still on him. The cheers had faded. A few fans clapped half-heartedly. Others looked down at their screens, watching replays. The microphone, once eagerly gripped in his hand, now sat idle and forgotten. Not a single taunt remained. Every boast the young fighter had flung earlier had now dissolved into a thick, humbling silence. Sylvester Stallone's presence didn't vanish when he stepped out of the cage. It lingered like smoke after a fire. What stunned the crowd wasn't just the final blow, but how effortlessly the tide had turned. Without raising his voice, without a single dramatic gesture, Sylvester shifted the atmosphere of the entire arena. The roar of the crowd persisted long after he disappeared down the tunnel, yet beneath the headlines and the flickering camera flashes, a quieter lesson emerged. Respect isn't demanded through noise. It's built slowly, steadily, without fanfare. The younger man had come into the fight believing that volume and aggression were the true signs of power. He mistook shouting for confidence and brute force for dominance. But strength, true, unshakable strength, never has to announce its arrival. Sylvester's quiet resolve didn't stem from celebrity or belts on a shelf. It was rooted in relentless practice, careful control, and a commitment to let actions speak on his behalf. He didn't rise to meet arrogance with empty rebuttals. He broke it down with silence and skill. That is the line separating those who perform strength and those who live it. Because once the spotlights dim and the crowd fades into the night, only one truth stands. Arrogance can't hold its ground against genuine ability. And those who truly fight, they don't boast. They let their discipline do the talking. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you pause and reflect on what strength really is, then you're already beginning to understand what thousands witnessed in that arena. Sylvester didn't have to shout or posture. He didn't need fireworks or fanfare. He let silence, discipline, and action do all the talking. And in doing so, he reminded us that real power isn't loud, it's steady, it's focused, and it leaves a lasting impact long after the moment has passed. Maybe that's why stories like this resonate so deeply. Because deep down, we all recognize the difference between noise and substance, between arrogance and mastery. And in a world full of distractions, a quiet lesson like this can feel like a breath of fresh air. If you felt that too, I invite you to be part of this journey with us. Hit the like button if this story made you think. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. We'd love to hear what this moment meant to you. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that moves you, surprises you, or makes you see the world a little differently. There are so many more stories to tell, stories of quiet strength, unexpected courage, and moments that speak louder than any words ever could. Stay with us. The best is yet to come.